Shall we begin?
Shall we begin? Cool. Oh, over to you, Karen.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much all for coming today. We are extremely proud to be here today because it's testament to how amazing Vocal Beats have been over the years. But so we're here to celebrate Vocal Beats this morning. And Vocal Beats, as you know, is a music making and beatboxing project that it started for young patients at Brompton and Harefield NHS Foundation Trust, a specialist healthcare centre for lung and heart disease. But this innovative project was started by Karen Taylor back in 2015, working with the Brompton Fountain, and Heather McLachlan, who came on board and became a resident musician on the wards, developing partnership with a play team, with a physio team, Charlotte Wells here today, with clinicians, and developing it time and time again. We've got, since then, since 2015, it grew and grew and grew into what is now a spectacular multidisciplinary project at the intersections of creativity and self-expression, learning and participation, the voice and technology. So my name is Karen Jonady, and I'm the current head of arts at Brompton and Harefield. And I want to just tell you how grateful I am for being part of this team, and also to all of our funders. So thank you, Youth Music, for taking us on this journey today of really understanding what Vocal Beats is about and helping us understand the transformational impact it's had on patients and on ourselves and on musicians. We're also very grateful to the Brompton Fountain, who's followed us throughout the years. The Court Foundation Building Connection Youth Chant has helped us develop a model of co-participation and co-design with young patients and ambassadors, which we're now modeling most of our activities on, which is great and lasting legacy. To the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity for enabling us to develop a strong partnership with the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust, and taking the creative engagement of Vocal Beats to the Royal Marsden in Sutton, and that's thriving as well. And obviously, previously, the BBC Children in Need, who helped us start the whole process of evaluation. Anyway, all of our funders have helped us nurture Vocal Beats from a seed to a model of creative youth engagement, which is now thriving at the hospital with us, at the Marsden, but also online. And this for us is testament of the resilience of the project. So not only have we delivered great activities on the ward and really impacted on patients, but we're also continuing to develop it in the time of the COVID pandemic. And what I just want to say, a special thank you to the artists, actually, because what they've done in my eyes is they've lit a little flame inside the patients' hearts. And it's such an important thing to do, because they've allowed that flame to grow at its own pace over time and allow patients to thrive. So with this, I want to give my unreserved thank yous to the artists, Heather McLachlan, Stag Darsdale, MC Zaini, and Bellatrix, but also all of the other great talented artists that we've worked with all over the years. And that thanks to Sound Connections as well for helping us recruit some really talented musicians. I'm not going to talk very much more about Vocal Beats, because you're going to find out from our great speakers today what Vocal Beats is about. And we're going to watch a video to explain what it is. But if I can say one more thing, I think what the musicians have brought as well to patients is a lot of love. And love of wanting to share music to young patients, love of seeing a smile on their faces, and despite the pain and the fear, and really wanting to have them develop despite the circumstances through music. And this has now evolved into a really great and open project which could go anywhere. And this is what this has shown to us. And today, what we're doing with the evaluation report and what you're going to hear is setting the foundations for what we're going to do in the future. So it's really timely, actually, because we've gone through a very difficult phase with the COVID pandemic, and we're very grateful to Youth Music and our funders for helping us continue working with the artists throughout that time. But we are now ready for the next phase of Vocal Beats. And finally, I just want to give my big thank you to the amazing Connie Rosewall, who's taken this project and made it more and more amazing year on year.
So just to introduce the event today and the report itself, the process of externally evaluating Vocal Beats began in 2019, so over a year ago now, thanks to funding provided by Youth Music, with the intention of evaluating and validating our practice as a designated hospital arts team delivering music in clinical settings. And thanks to the drive, curiosity and ingenuity of our 3 evaluators, it's become so much more than we expected. And this collaborative report, as Karen said, is testament to the efficacy and intrinsically multidisciplinary nature and potential of vocal beats. Examined from 3 experts of their respective fields in music education, music and healthcare, and respiratory physiotherapy, this report casts an in-depth critical eye on the details of our work, recognising and advocating our successes, whilst identifying areas to adapt, strengthen, and build upon, providing a crucial learning and development opportunity for both us as an organisation, along with anyone else who's working on or looking to develop any music projects in complex healthcare settings. And as Karen mentioned as well, our work has of course been heavily impacted by the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, but we have persevered and we've been continuing to work with our amazing core musicians to test out different models of online engagement, both at Royal Brompton and Harefield NHS Foundation Trust and the Royal Marsden Foundation Trust, with whom we're working in partnership. And we are excitingly planning another public event in 2021 to showcase our partnership with the Royal Marsden, along with our learning and development of virtual facilitation with our artists. So do keep an eye out for that. And now let's get started. Our first speaker will be Marion Friend, who is an amazing person, and she's held key positions at Trinity Lavin and BBC Music and Arts, and she's been evaluating vocal beats from very much a music education perspective. So over to you, Marion.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, yeah. Thank you, Connie, and thank you for inviting me to talk about vocal beats. I had the privilege of observing some sessions for the Singing for Breathing programme several years ago, and that experience has stayed with me. When I was given the opportunity to go into the children's and young adult wards for this evaluation last year and talk to the resident professional musicians, the play teams and clinicians, patients and their carers, it reinforced my view that Royal Brompton and Harefield Arts are doing groundbreaking and distinctive work in a holistic environment. My evaluation, looking at the Vocal Beats programme structure and artistic interventions, covered these areas. For this event and the limited time available, I'll focus on a couple of headlines. Youth voice. Youth voice and autonomy are terms that are frequently lauded in various contexts today, but sometimes the reality is different. However, Royal Brompton and Harefield Arts are fully committed to engaging with young people and giving them opportunities to have a say in their music making that's both in the moment and also strategic. This is particularly important given that patients can be in hospital in various capacities, be it long-term or multiple stay. They have very little autonomy in other areas of their lives given the circumstances, so patient engagement and decision-making in their musical experience are particularly valuable for their well-being, confidence and creativity. The Vocal Beats Youth Ambassador Programme for those aged 17 to 25 enables young people to access resources online and to create a musical network alongside the team of professional musicians and the filmmaker in order to address the isolation that they may experience, given that many are unable to make music together in person. There would be opportunities, in my view, to develop this further with wider external peer online networks, depending on the direction the ambassadors wish to take. The Royal Brompton and Harefield Trailblazers programme is the Trust's youth forum for young people aged 13 to 25, with the aims of peer support and networking, learning and social activities, and improving healthcare services. The relationship between Vocal Beats and Royal Brompton and Harefield Trailblazers has strengthened throughout lockdown, with young people taking part in special music workshops and short courses and feeding back on their desires to learn new skills. When I realised the extent of the Vocal Beats programme and its impact, I made some suggestions in the report for a more structured approach to patients' musical progression and pointed out the irony that many young patients are only accessing music provision when they return to Royal Brompton Hospital for their regular clinical stays. There could, of course, be many reasons for this. One parent I talked to said her daughter often said, "Mum, don't forget to pack my ukulele," when she was returning to hospital for treatment, and yet she wasn't engaging with any music locally. Patient choice remains paramount given the ethos of the Vocal Beats programme. However, consideration could be given to setting up pilot networks supporting motivated patients to create individual pathways or learning plans to sustain their musical activity between hospital visits in their own locality. The initiative would seem timely given the development of the National Academy of Social Prescribing partnership with Arts Council England and NHS England. In the evaluation, I also mentioned the potential for buddy plans for online ensemble work and for recording compositions and performances, and online links with the wider musical community, both with peers and role models. I realised that there could be capacity and funding issues for all these initiatives, given the small team at Royal Brompton and Harefield Arts, but there's much potential too, and I remain ambitious for them. The Musicians in Healthcare Mentoring Programme was launched in 2018 and is delivered by RB&H Arts in partnership with Sound Connections and supported by Youth Music. I'm pleased to say that Nicola Tago, mentee in the first cohort, is here to talk about her experience on the programme. Hello, Nicola. Thank you.
Hello, Marion.
Thank you very much for being here today. Could you briefly describe participating in the Musicians in Healthcare Mentoring Programme?
Yeah, certainly. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience to be involved in the mentoring programme. So grateful to RB&H Arts, Sound Connections and Youth Music for just giving this opportunity. So I think really the most important part of it for me was having the opportunity to gain that first-hand experience of being on the wards, forming those connections with the patients, working together with the lead musicians. So for me personally, I had some experience previously in organising music and healthcare projects, but very, very different to actually being on the wards and gaining that experience as a musician. And I think really just seeing the impact that music can have, in bringing families together, working with, so that was with Vocal Beats, but then also working with adult patients on the wards, and kind of, using music to open up those discussions and bring back memories of maybe how they connected with songs from their past. So it was really, really powerful experiences that I was having as a musician. I think it kind of just reinvigorated my connection and kind of my purpose through being a musician and music making.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an introduction. What ways did the programme help you with your professional development?
So I'd say it was transformational, really, with regards to my career. So I'm a flautist and a singer. But the majority of my work before taking part in the programme had been teaching the flute sort of on a one-to-one and a small group basis. So through this experience, just with the skills that I'd gained and the experiences that I was having, firstly, I was really delighted to be able to continue some of the work with Royal Brompton and Harefield, and also with so I was able to bring music and healthcare into into my portfolio career as a musician. But then also just giving me the confidence to kind of use these skills within different settings as well. So more participatory music making. I was really inspired, mostly through vocal beats, working with the families and babies and young children, to gain more experience and start working more in early years music making as well. So I'd started working in assisting early years music sessions, and gradually expanded on my experience in that to leading sessions as well. So that's been a really lovely kind of progression to my career path through taking part in the project. And I think generally just my confidence as a musician, sort of improvising, kind of knowing what kind of music works in different spaces, and being a lot more responsive when working with groups. So yeah, I think in many ways it's just allowed my career as a music educator to flourish really in directions that I don't think I would have pursued before taking part in this wonderful programme.
Thank you so much. And very briefly, and because we're so short of time, do you have any suggestions for how the programme could be developed, notwithstanding the present constraints?
I think there were so many good aspects to it, but very well prepared and well supported throughout the programme. Probably the one thing that I guess we could have had more of was kind of connecting with the other mentees during the programme, because we met them, or we all met together during the induction session. That was fantastic, and then at the end for the evaluation. But maybe just finding more points in between to kind of share all the the experiences and sharing I guess during the actual programme, kind of touching base with the other mentees.
Great.
But yeah, apart from that, I think
that's fabulous. Well, that was inspiring to hear, Nicola. Thank you. The second cohort started in January this year, but the programme was inevitably disrupted and placed on pause for the time being. However, they did have an extended 2-day musician-led interactive induction chaired by lead musician Heather McLennan, with presentation workshop contributions from core musicians, members of the clinical and ward-based staff from both Royal Brompton and the Royal Marsden, and Jen Raven of Sound Connections, who I'm pleased is here today. And this covered topics including emotional well-being, reflective practice, evaluation, facilitation, inclusion, and infection prevention and control. I'm sure that this flagship mentoring programme will go from strength to strength. And finally, just to talk very briefly about the profile of Vocal Beats. With the programme now on the cusp of further exciting developments, it may be an opportune moment to share good practice more extensively with a wider range of stakeholders to increase the profile and consolidate its status. Some suggestions include forging links with professional and amateur music ensembles with whom there's an artistic synergy, and increasing awareness of the Vocal Beats programme amongst commercial and corporate organisations, as well as trusts and foundations, notwithstanding the valuable support that the programme already receives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion, and thank you, Nicola, as well. That was really inspirational and covered so much as well in such a short space of time. We will be moving now on to Gráinne Hope, who joins us from Ireland. She's Director of Kids Classics. There you are. And she will be speaking today from the artist's perspective. Just trying to find you to make you co-host, Gráinne, sorry.
No problem, you're okay.
Make co-host, there you are.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to take 1 second and see. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
Thank you all. I'm delighted to be invited to be part of this team that would evaluate and validate the Vocal Beats programme, with my role being to examine the artistic quality outcomes. This involved interviewing the artists on the subject of their lived experiences as professional musicians working in healthcare, and how that correlates to or I suppose impacts their professional role outside the healthcare setting. I suppose defining or creating a framework for measurement of quality outcomes in the arts is recognised as a challenging task and is something that has always been open to debate. Nonetheless, there seems to be an understanding shared by many arts organisations that outcomes are specific to each programme and context and should be underpinned by how the work engages with its audiences. And when looking at artistic outcomes, several considerations come to mind of the musical, personal and professional competencies of the musicians facilitating the musical engagement, who are central to the success and quality of any programme. Just hoping my slides will move on. Technical. There, perfect, great. So the approach I applied to this review used qualitative methods, which includes informal interviews and a focus group with the Vocal Beats musicians, as well as observed visits in Harefield Hospital on Rose Ward at the Royal Brompton Hospital. The topic guides designed for the interview and focus groups were developed from research, personal experience developing programme partnerships, managing programmes and supporting artists, as well as training professional musicians working in healthcare settings. Here are some of the topic guides, topics that were used in the interview and focus group. In relation to the role, we looked at what drew them to the role and what kept them in the role. In relation to training, had they any prior training to prepare them for the role and in the role itself? Around what skills, what was important for a hospital musician, what kind of skills? And as an artist working in the role of a hospital musician, what were the challenges? We also looked at the influence of both the role of the professional musician and that of the hospital musician role on each other. What aspects of each role, if any, influenced each other. And we also looked at the approach in engaging with patients, families and clinical staff. The last one we looked around was, how do you measure success? How do you see it, recognise and measure it? So the results really we brought together into three main themes. It became very apparent. The first was the professional musician in healthcare, the relationships, and the artistic supports. Each main theme was then further subdivided into three sub-themes. So the first one, the professional musician in healthcare, we looked at what came up, should I say, was the role of a musician in healthcare, the competencies and appropriate skill set for this role, and the challenges in the dual artist role. The musicians engaged in the Vocal Beats programme were drawn to the role for many different reasons. Some became involved by responding to an open call by the hospital for an artist in residence. Others were invited to cover a maternity post, and several of the musicians had been professional colleagues prior to starting in this role. When asked what motivations drew them to the role, the two main reasons that emerged were a love of music and that of working with children. One musician added, "It made sense." When the discussion turned to what keeps them working in this role, another musician commented, "It's really fun and it's like a real privilege. It is intense and it's not for everyone. There are big challenges, but it does give you a sense of purpose." During the focus group, there was some interesting discussions around the additional skills and competencies necessary that the musicians felt to work as a hospital musician in that role. These included the need for flexibility, adaptability, good communication, the ability to think under pressure, to be sensitive and generous with letting the music be patient-led, and the need to be emotionally intelligent. It's worth noting that the professional musicians facilitating the Vocal Beats programme are all highly skilled professional singer-songwriters and champion beatboxers. They all have a lot of experience working with music and children in education and community contexts that predates their involvement in the Vocal Beats programme. And in both the interviews and the focus group, the artists engaged with exploring their different roles as professional musicians and as professional musicians working in healthcare, and the impact that each role had on the other. One musician commented that it's very easy for them not to hold the two roles in equal regard, but it remains nonetheless important for them as facilitators to remember that they are also performing artists. And while the roles can feed into each other, it is important to make space for each one. One musician said that they felt that being an artist in hospital involved a fine dance. People love to hear them perform and hear about their professional lives also outside of the setting. Another musician shared that it can also be a challenge musically, as someone will always ask them to play something that they may not know. And all the musicians acknowledge that you can never be prepared for every situation. When the area around measuring the success of a music engagement came up, a musician shared something to me which really illustrates what progression and success might look like in these in-the-moment contexts. They said, "We are very lucky that the little things that might not be considered a successful session in an educational establishment, like someone smiling or a baby tapping their foot, that's an incredible successful session in a subtle way." The musicians agreed that the training they had received to improve their understanding of cystic fibrosis and the physical components of breathing, alongside writing arts observations, had helped them to recognise what success might look like in this context. One musician went on to say, "You have to develop a language to understand it." The second main theme that emerged was that around relationships, and which we categorised into three further themes: that of musicians and staff, relationships of musicians and patients, and then the musicians as a team itself. The Vocal Beats musicians have developed strong relationships with the play team on Rose Ward, and there's a handover from the play team, and when necessarily, if there was a complex case, a play specialist would accompany them to do introductions if were needed. It emerged later in the discussions the potential for this to be considered in the adult wards where the programme takes place, and it was felt that identifying an individual or team member who would be able to fully brief the musicians on each young person would enable the musicians to better tailor the session to meet the patient's individual needs. Around relationships for musicians and patients, a musician expanded, commenting on the importance of offering young patients the choice to take part in a music session. In the musician's own words, "I can offer them a choice because they don't get to choose that many things in hospital, and for them to say yes, I love that you can say no to me as well. I want to offer you something you can say no to. It's a real privilege to be able to do that. I feel very lucky." The Vocal Beats programme has been delivered by both it started individually with the musician, and now it has grown to be a programme that supports music delivered both individually and in pairs. The participating musicians' previous professional relationships and friendships that existed before working with the Vocal Beats programme has certainly helped them become a solid musical and supportive team. As one musician commented, "It's a joy to collaborate with other exceptional musicians." And the last of the main themes that emerged was that around artist supports, with three sub-themes around reflection, journaling, and music in healthcare training. The musicians felt that their current involvement in programme documentation has helped create more awareness of the role, and that the arts observations they do have helped them to observe more details of the music's impact during every visit. The musicians recognised the need to reflect individually and also with their team partner. One musician noted, "On your own, it's quite lonely, so good to reflect as a team." Journaling was a more recent addition at the time of this evaluation into the practice of the Vocal Beats programme. The musicians acknowledged that they had been very helpful. It had been a very helpful form of reflection and in supporting their writing of case studies. They felt that it was important for them to more clearly understand what they are documenting. For example, the different forms of documentation. For example, was it the purpose of specific data or feedback, or was it around their own reflections? And I suppose the last sub-theme then that under this area, none of the Vocal Beats musician had any specific music and healthcare training prior to starting the role with the Vocal Beats, although two had observed another musician in the team before commencing the role, and one of the musicians had undertaken some training with Opus Music since they began with Vocal Beats. However, all musicians did receive a hospital induction. As well, they have taken part in CPD training relating to respiratory diseases, and they all confirmed that this has helped them understand more of the physical and medical challenges of patients they meet. So in summing up, to bring together some of this and making some recommendations for opportunities moving forward, I'll just share with you 3 of the main recommendations made. To look at standardising the evaluation process, excuse me, for the musicians to gain a common understanding to enable them gather deeper and richer data. Around the opportunities for CPDs to allow musicians to continue to expand their knowledge via attendance at workshops and conferences. And also the opportunities around exchange programs or collaborations with leading programs nationally and internationally. And the last one I'm going to share with you today is around embedding structures for reflective practice into the musician's work to develop experiential learning and self-supervision. And I just want to take the opportunity, I suppose, to thank, I'm delighted I've been invited to be part of the evaluation team with wonderful colleagues, and also for the open sharing by the musicians of their role and the challenges in that. And really, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to see their amazing work in action. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gráinne. That was wonderful. That was a really concise sort of summary of everything covered, which I know is really rich in all of your findings. I realised we didn't say to everyone that if we'll be doing questions at the end after Charlotte's presentation next, but if you have questions, please do just put them in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we get through to them when it comes to it. We're now moving on to Charlotte Wells, who I'm just going to make co-host, and spotlight, there you are. And Charlotte is highly specialist respiratory physiotherapist at Royal Brompton and Harefield NHS Foundation Trust, working with young patients, and she's here to speak on the clinical perspective of vocal beats.
Thank you very much. I'll just try and get the presentation up. Hang on a second. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really excited to see how much interest this evaluation report has generated, and it's really encouraging for this amazing team. So I will take you on a whistle-stop tour of the 3rd section of this evaluation report, which is that of the clinical perspective. So why is this intervention important to analyse from a clinical perspective? The vocal beat and the arts team's hope is that through their artistic talent and their skills, that they might be able to offer an alternative intervention which can support the other treatments that the patient may be receiving with their time in the hospital, and something that then they can benefit their health when they go home and in the community. So the first thing that we do when we're trying to analyse the potential benefits of an intervention is to look at what we already know, what's published in the literature. So I'm going to briefly talk you through some of the key points of a specific literature review, which was looking at the physical health benefits of singing interventions. Because beatboxing is such a novel intervention, there's not a lot of that. So some of it is extrapolated literature evidence, trying to apply it to this new team. Then we'll look through some themes that emerged through analysing interview transcripts, which were taken from the Singing Hospital project, and I'll briefly introduce that project if you don't know about it. And then finally, we'll look through some suggestions on where we can head moving forwards. So the first task was, like I said, to review the literature that's published so that we can get a better understanding of how music, singing and beatboxing for cardiorespiratory health could be beneficial. So how the intervention might work, there were 3 umbrella areas, shall we say, that seemed to come up through looking at the literature. The first being the effects of singing and music making on lung volumes. So for children with heart and lung conditions, the respiratory muscles play a really important role in maintaining lung health. Airway clearance, breathing control, exercise and breathing patterns are really common themes in a child's health management, and potential areas where singing and beatboxing can support the clinical team's efforts in maintaining and optimising health. So studies have shown that singing requires our bodies to consciously regulate and control the airflow in and out of our lungs. It encourages us to take bigger breaths, greater volumes of air, so that we're using more of our lung capacity. But really it's how this is done and the quality of the breath, and that actually it's encouraging larger breaths, but rather than to the top of our chests, actually to the lower thoracic and getting good diaphragmatic activation, which is really the key here. And this actually mimics a lot of the physiology behind the airway clearance techniques that we might use as physiotherapists. So it suggests in the literature that these bigger breaths to the lower part of our chests might help. So to give a little bit of context, for some children with various respiratory conditions or after heart operations might have a build-up of sticky secretions and mucus on their chest that they might need to clear as a one-off after surgery, or actually they might have that daily production because of the lung condition they have. And this type of breathing can help move stuck secretions, might help potentially open up areas of the lung that these secretions have been plugging off and blocking off. And with the control of the exhalation forces and pressures and control of the breath, it might actually help move those secretions further up the chest, so that either during the session they might cough and clear something, or when they later come to do their physiotherapy airway clearance, it's much easier to clear what's there on their chest. And singing is a much more fun way of doing that than physio breathing exercises. The second thing is considering posture. And what I really mean about that is actually trying to get the correct or optimal postural alignment for the body. And again, both physiotherapy interventions and singing and beatboxing sessions aim to regain that optimal posture, to relax the muscles in the face, the head and the neck, to get the correct movement and curvatures back in the spine, which then allows for better and freer movement of the larynx, of the diaphragm, by engaging the core with a good posture and pelvis position. Means that also you get much better pelvic floor activation. Now, why are these things important? Again, for children with heart and lung conditions, we know from a very young age they can get real postural changes, stiffness, which then affects the dynamics of how they breathe. They can, with a chronic cough, they can develop their upper abdominal muscles, stomach muscles, but have a real weakness in their core, which can lead to stress incontinence. So all of these are hugely important for the health of a child. Additionally, with the beatboxing, potentially the resistance that you get from the shape of the lips, the tongue, and the mouth to the breath out gives a positive expiratory pressure, a resistance to the airflow, which again ties in quite nicely with some of the physiology around our pursed lip breathing we might teach for breath and breathing control in physiotherapy. Now, what re-establishing good use of our lower lung volumes, a better posture, good diaphragmatic activation also leads into the third thing, which is my area of clinical interest, which is about your breathing pattern. Now, briefly to introduce quite a complex topic, we often feel like we're born breathing a certain way, how we breathe is how we breathe, and there's one way to breathe. And in essence, this just isn't true. It's a really complex, dynamic, constantly adapting system. And for some who might be elite athletes, they can adapt and change the way they breathe to be really beneficial for them. Often in respiratory health, what we find is these adaptations, which may come from a particularly bad chest infection, a scary asthma attack, or anxiety around breathlessness, is that they have negative impacts on their breathing pattern, which become really unhelpful because it can lead to increased breathlessness and reduced participation in school activities, sport. So again, with the singing and beatboxing interventions positively impacting how a child and young person can change and adapt their breathing pattern to work really well for them is hugely beneficial. So quickly skipping on, for those of you who are not aware of this work, last year to celebrate 10 years of the Singing for Breathing project at the Royal Brompton and Harefield, there was an arts practitioner-led project run by Victoria Hume, which ended in a big performance at the Royal College of Physicians. As part of this, Victoria interviewed those who took part in the sessions, those who led the singing sessions, but also those clinicians, doctors and physios who were involved in this project from the beginning. And it was those interviews I was particularly interested and very grateful that I was allowed access to those transcripts. And then I used a qualitative method of thematic framework analysis, where you read the transcripts, you create a code, and then you look for themes that develop throughout all of the interviews. And there were 4 main themes that seemed to emerge. There was one which really focused on, really early in all of the interviews actually, how surprised and how notable it was that the dynamic, high energy, physical level of these singing sessions, and how that was quite unexpected. And that definitely echoes with the Vocal Beats team. It's a real whole body experience, which is fantastic. The second, like we've already touched on, is that practical focus on breath. And throughout the transcripts, there was a real consideration for how breath control was attended to through the sessions, and how actually this is really quite different to traditional methods of breathlessness management in healthcare, but how important and applicable this was to those taking part to their daily lives. The third is an interesting one, is about how it's non-threatening to a medical paradigm. So the success of any arts programme within the healthcare or hospital setting does often require the support of a lead or influential consultant, with whom overall responsibility for the patient's health does lie. So it's sort of inescapable that arts programmes do need the support and endorsement of the consultants to be able to gain that foothold within the hospital setting. So it's really encouraging that the lead consultant, who was fundamental in starting this project, stated that it's not challenging any kind of medical paradigm for me. It just seems perfectly normal, a sensible thing. I think it will take its place as a useful activity and something that we can recommend. The fourth and final theme was a note of caution around the current level of knowledge and scientific evidence that we have on the theory and impact of singing interventions. So they describe a really good level of qualitative and experimental evidence that we really need to invest in getting randomized control trials or physiological trials, looking at the hows and the whys before this can be accepted as an adjunct to medical care. So because the exciting thing about Vocal Beats, because it's such a new and novel intervention, that we've got a really great opportunity to progress our knowledge in this area. And it's exciting for funders to know the possibilities of this for this group in the future. So moving forward, just finishing, I would recommend investigations into the impact of the effects of the most common singing and beatboxing techniques used within the Vocal Beats team, so that we might better be able to understand and unpick the efficacies of these techniques for children with heart and lung conditions. Analysis should focus on the singing and beatboxing techniques from a physiological and vocal coaching perspective. So once we've deepened our knowledge in evidencing why and how these singing techniques might work and how they benefit and what they offer, then we can more widely recommend their use in a huge variety of settings. Thank you very much for your time. And then I think we're going to go on to questions.